the top, in a tiny metal capsule, are the astronauts of Apollo 11. Their names are Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. They will make the first attempt to land on the moon.
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
After 3 days in space, the Apollo 11 astronauts began preparing to slow down and put the craft in orbit around the moon. Unfortunately, this maneuver had to be carried out on the far side of the moon, away from radio contact. A mistake at this time might send them crashing into the moon, or worse, speeding off into deep space with no hope of return.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. All your systems are looking good going around the corner. We'll see you on the other side. Over.
The astronauts were on their own. There was nothing Mission Control could do but wait.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Have you read? Apollo 11, this is Houston. Do you read over? Apollo 11, Houston, do you read?
Bring your last clear, Houston, how are you?
Roger, reading your thing now.
The calculations were perfect to the second. Apollo 11 was now safely in orbit around the moon.
Like the pictures, but like the difference between watching a real football game and one on TV, no substitute for actually being here.
Roger, we concur, and we certainly wish we could see it firsthand also.
It was now time. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar lander, ready to attempt the first ever moon landing. As they detach, Michael Collins is left alone in the main spacecraft. He knows there is a high likelihood that he will be making the return journey to Earth alone. There are 3 possible outcomes to their attempt. They will land, they will abort, or they will crash. Back in Mission Control, Flight Director Gene Kranz and his team monitor the progress of the landing craft.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for powered descent. Retro, go. Pilot, go. Tight, go. Control, go. Telcom,
Go.
GNC,
Go.
ECOM, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, word go for powered descent.
Eagle looking great, you're down. Roger, your go climbing, 3,000 feet. Into the ag, 47 degrees, Roger. 47 degrees. Bravo 1. Bravo 1, Roger, 1201 alarm.
An alarm sounds. Something is wrong with the computer. Mission Control must quickly decide whether to abort the mission. They choose to continue. Armstrong realizes that they are going to miss the planned landing site and are heading for a boulder field.
700 feet, 21 down, 33 degrees.
He takes over control from the landing computer. All those hours of training come into play.
540 feet down at 30, down at 15.
Armstrong tries to find a flat landing site, but the lander is running out of fuel.
30 seconds.
When the clock gets to 0, they'll have to abort.
6, 9.5.
30 seconds.
Big shadow. 20 feet down, 2.5. Bring up the sun. Contact light. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Rocket Point, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Goodbye, bye, Columbia. He has landed. Tranquility, but his Eagle is in Tranquility. Over.
Yeah, I heard the whole thing. Fantastic.
They had done it. Every single person in the Apollo program had contributed to this moment. Together, they had put humans on the moon, and they had got there first. Back on Earth, 500 million people watched Neil Armstrong descend the ladder and become the first human to walk on the moon.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined him on the moon. The two moonwalkers had little time to enjoy the scenery. For the next 2.5 hours, they took photographs, set out experiments, and collected different types of rock and soil to bring home. Apollo 11 revolutionized our relationship with space. We had now proved that we could go beyond Earth. We had taken our first steps to exploring the cosmos. When the 3 astronauts returned, they were celebrated by a changed world. They returned to Earth as heroes. Politically, the reason for going to the moon had been accomplished. The space race had been won. The national ideal that dedication could achieve anything, even take you to the moon, had triumphed. For many, this is where the story ends. But the Apollo 11 landing was only the first step in the human exploration of space. With renewed confidence in their spacecraft, NASA set out to explore other areas of the moon. But first they needed to improve their accuracy. Apollo 11 had missed its landing site by 6 kilometers. Only 4 months later, Apollo 12 successfully landed just 200 meters from its target, near an earlier spacecraft called Surveyor 3. They collected samples and set up science stations. These continued to transmit data long after the crew returned to Earth. Apollo 13 was unable to attempt a moon landing. Early in the journey, an oxygen tank exploded, forcing the crew to abort the mission. Traveling too fast to turn around and fly straight back to Earth, they had to use the moon's gravity to slingshot them back home. The teams in mission control worked around the clock trying to save the crippled spacecraft. Over the radio, Capcom talked the crew through every plan the teams had devised to keep them alive. Incredibly, all 3 astronauts survived, but only just. Budget constraints forced NASA to reduce the number of moon missions it had planned. So to increase the astronauts' range of exploration and science, the engineers packed an electric moon rover. On Apollo 15, moon exploration moved up a gear. The first astronauts had engineering qualifications and were able to set up scientific experiments. But NASA now realized they needed a trained geologist to identify the most valuable rocks to study and return. On Apollo 17, Harrison